We're joined by a few representatives or elected officials. We have Patrick Lyons from Representative Nicholas's office, and we have Maria Pablo from Senator Petroselli's office. Tonight we're here to have a bit of a working session to gain some feedback from all of you about the next direction or the next steps that we want to take in developing the ramp concepts. So we'll start off by first just reviewing some of the major elements of what we've presented before, and then kind of roll up our sleeves and even gather around the table up here and start, using the trace and whatnot, coming up with some ideas. So I guess I'll move to team introductions. We all want to just go around. John, you want to?
Sure. Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm John Romano. Sorry, I got a cold. I'm the legislative liaison for the Mass Department of Transportation. And something I just want to throw out there, we haven't really, we talked a little bit about it the last two meetings, but, and it's probably, sitting out there, cost. Right? Everything costs something, so we just need to keep in mind as we're going through this exercise. As Lauren said, we're looking at some of the concepts we've been throwing out there. We don't want to squelch anybody's creative juices. We want to hear more and more from you. We've gotten a lot of feedback, but just know as we start to design these things, the bigger they are, the more detailed they are, the more money they cost. And while we don't have necessarily a budget, as my colleague Steve McLaughlin has answered the question in both the last two meetings when someone has asked about cost, is that we do have a capital improvement plan. It's a 5-year plan. It's a rolling plan. So every year it moves out to the next 5 years, and it has a cap cost on it, a dollar amount, and we fix all of our bridges and stuff with that. So every dollar that we spend on this will come out of a bridge that doesn't, that's a dollar we don't spend on a bridge. So money will, play into this as we move forward. So I just want to keep that in mind as we're coming up with, designing these, coming up with concepts at this point for these covers, no matter which way we go, whether it's screening or partial cover or whatever, or building or whatever. So I just want to make sure that we keep that in mind as we move forward. And at some point, we're going to have to figure that out as we move forward. Good enough, Steve? Did I cover that? I just want to make sure we got that out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John, that was a really long introduction for me. I'm not nearly as popular as him. Rock La Rochelle HDR, working for Mass DOT.
Kevin Morrison, I'm a civil engineer at HDR.
Matthew Latalo, principal at UTL. We are urban designers, planners in the project.
Emily Ashby, UTL. Mary Deanne, UTL.
Robin Workforce, landscape architect at Mass DOT.
Steve McLaughlin, project manager at Mass DOT.
Elton Ramirez, Mass DOT.
Forward through our agenda, we already did introductions, described the purpose and format. I think the next couple slides really are moving into the review of the parcel concepts. So,
Certainly. So I'm just going to very quickly review where we were at the last meeting. I want to save some time for us to workshop a little bit. And then Rock is going to maybe go into a little bit more detail of some of the stuff that we've been working on and analyzing since we last met.
John was going to do that. You want to cover that stuff?
yeah.
Okay. So as I mentioned, we'll go through some of the concepts to date, review some of the design models. We'll have a little bit of an ideas workshop, and then we'll wrap up at the end and discuss next steps. Location of the ramp parcels, 18, 12, 6. Very quickly. Once again, 18, 12, and 6. We did, as you might recall, one of our methodologies was to look at various ways in which the ramps might be concealed, covered, whatever you want to call it. And so in order to be systematic in a way, we looked at for each For each ramp, we looked at various options of screening, that is vertical sort of screening, cover, that we're calling sort of horizontal cover, and a kind of building concept that is completely covering with some occupiable structure. So we wanted to test all the various possibilities that we might consider for covering these parcels. And I'll cycle through those very quickly and give it over to Rob. I'm going to start at the north this time, parcel 6. This is an aerial view of the existing series of ramps there. This is an idea about screening over those so that, again, it's just vertical screening to conceal what might be there. We had an idea about cover, and you'll notice that with this ramp and with the others, that the extent of this cover has an odd shape. And the reason for that is that, to the best of our knowledge at this point, this is the extent to which you can actually cover the ramp without adversely affecting the air handling characteristics of the mechanical equipment of the tunnel. A lot of this has to be verified further in some studies, but from the studies that have been done to date, this is our best sort of understanding right now of how much of those ramps we can cover. And you'll notice that they're sloped as they come out of the ground to keep them a constant height above the ramp. So again, it's just a very abstract, if we were to put as much horizontal surface over those ramps, how much could it be, what would it be as a sort of starting piece? And then a kind of design iteration that built on that. Well, what if we actually use that configuration of ramps as a kind of springboard to create some nice circulation with some green space on top? A kind of, for example, that might get you from one critical juncture to another in a series of ramps that were ADA accessible and so forth. And then finally, we looked at a building concept, and in this case, it was the fairly concrete proposal for the YMCA. We didn't want to create some abstract thing here. We felt that this was a fairly credible proposal at the time, but we wanted to show that just to give it its fair shake as one of the things that we might want to consider here. So a summary of the series of those options. And by the way, during our workshop, if anyone wants to come back, we can keep these slides up for reference and that sort of thing. Parcel 12, this is the perspective of the existing parcel. To orient you, there's Quincy Market right there. Here's a north arrow. The north end is down here. Screening, and again, just to remind you, screening could be anything. It could be a wall, it could be an artwork, it could be a series of plantings. We want to have a sort of open mind about what that is. And it could be of various heights. So this is showing something that's approximately 12 feet high, but it could be 6, it could be 4. I want to make sure that everyone understands that there's some combination here that's possible. And then the sort of raw cover option. And again, this is simply applying those limitations that I mentioned to the best of our knowledge. How much can we cover without, again, adversely affecting the ventilation of the tunnels? And having done this scenario, we looked at it a little bit more opportunistically. Well, what if, so we noticed that these two ramp covers come up, and there's a point of convergence there. What if that point of convergence became maybe a destination of sorts, and you used the slope of that ramp as a kind of larger circulation path that got you from one end of the parcel to another? With an idea that maybe there could be some additional cover that had landscape. Again, not a design, but an emerging idea about some combination of landscape and pedestrian circulation. And then a building concept. This is not an actual building concept, it's really an envelope that would conform to the zoning for this site, which is essentially a volume approximately 55 feet tall. With, as I mentioned, sort of cutouts, again, at the critical ramp areas for that ventilation requirement. So that's parcel 12. And then moving on to parcel 18, as we've mentioned before, parcel 18 is a little bit more polished. It was designed originally as an open space parcel, not a future building parcel. So the landscape there is much more developed. Here's an idea about a screening option, and we raised the question about what are we screening from? Are we screening ourselves from the rest of the city or vice versa? Again, our best guess right now about what we're allowed to cover in terms of ramp, it's sort of funny, but not very much. This particular leg, I don't believe was really studied in any depth. So that's a kind of best guess. And then a building concept, and this building concept conforms to the zoning insofar as this is not a building parcel, this is an open space parcel on which zoning allows smaller pavilion-like structures. So this is a 1,200 square foot pavilion-like structure that we're locating at this particular juncture over the ramp parcel. It's not to say it couldn't go elsewhere, but this series of investigations really is about what we're doing with the ramps, and if we are to cover it with the pavilion, this is about the sort of extent of it. And then for this parcel in particular, because it is relatively finished, the landscape is quite mature and attractive, we want to propose the possibility that one option really here is no alteration, that it's pretty good the way it is. So we've proposed these different options for each parcel, not because they are sort of isolated possibilities, but to give you a full sense of a spectrum of things. So I imagine that at the end of the day that there would be a variety of different strategies on these sites. A little bit of fencing, a little bit of cover, a little bit of landscaping, a little bit of screening. But we wanted to test it with some rigor, at least what these different possibilities are. Rob will take it from here and talk a little bit in more detail about some of these design considerations.
So we've spent the last couple meetings talking in detail about design considerations, clearances, signage envelopes, all of that stuff. So those of you that have sat through those very long meetings, hopefully now you have a better understanding of some of the design constraints that we're working with and what is required to cover these things, to actually cover them. You know now that there's going to be a requirement to build up to be able to provide the clearance envelopes over these things. So what we did is we applied all of this information, took a couple of the concepts or the graphics that Matt showed earlier about cover options and potential desire lines for walkways, and kind of went into a little bit more detail to show you what that really means. If you're going to cover these things, look at it in more of a dimensional realm and see what does it really mean, how's it going to affect, what kind of walls are going to have to be put up to cover these things. And so hopefully by the time we're done, you'll have a much better understanding of what that means, and then we can apply that to the workshop session that we're going to do so that you have a broader understanding of what it means. So understanding the cover options. So this should look familiar. This is very much what Matt showed originally. It basically represents the length of cover that we can provide over the parcel without looking at potential alterations to the mechanical systems, the air handling systems. Over here, John. So what does this really mean? So you see this in two-dimensional view and it doesn't really show you anything. So we're going to look at slices through the parcel to show you when you apply the elevation requirement to the clearance, how does that affect the height of these things? So here's what it looks like. And we're going to walk through this parcel. This is parcel 6. Again, we're starting from north and going south. And this section here is taken at the south end of the parcel over here. And you'll see the red is what would be covered. That would be a cover option. And coincidentally, you'll see this red area here, which corresponds to this area over here. So this is what it would look like. You see the tunnels underground for I-93 northbound and southbound. And then you'll see these ramps which are open today here and here. You all know what they look like. It's got the rebar sticking up out of the ground. So if you were to cover that at the extreme south end of the parcel, here's what it would look like when you apply the height requirements for clearance. What's that?
Subdivision.
Subdivision, yeah. And Cross Street is over here. So Cross Street here, Cross Street, this is Blackstone Street. And here's the southbound ramps here, and these are the northbound ramps. So if you were to cover them all, this is what it would look like. And to give you a little bit of scale reference, we threw some people up here and some cars. So if you look over here, this would represent about 5.6 feet above existing grade today, where the cover would have to be. On this side, it's about the same. Is that read, Kevin? I can't see that.
3.5.
3.5. So it's the contacts, which are. So that's the extreme south end. You go a little bit further up, cutting right about here, and we see the same thing. You come up a little bit higher now, and now you see that elevation differential is 10 feet here and about 10 feet here. So you get to get an idea of how high now you have to come up out of the ground to actually make that work, to make that cover. So this red again represents all of the new cover that would be provided over here to cover the ramps. A little bit further up here, and you see how high these things are here. Now to provide that clearance again here and here above the vehicles, that's 12 feet. This here, the separation between the ramps, because they're staggered, there are two different elevations. That difference now is 7 feet here, and on this end, on the government center side, it's 12 point whatever feet that is. And then when you get down to the northern end of the parcel over here, you're almost back to grade. It's 8 feet here above Cross Street, so you'd be looking at a wall there on Cross Street and covering that portion of that ramp over here. Does everybody kind of see that? We're going to do something very similar for parcel 12. Okay. So parcel 12, again, you have the ramp cover that Matt threw it, that graphic that showed what that would look like. That's all this is. It shows the ramps that would be covered based on the limitations of the air handling. And so now when we look at that again, starting from the south end of the parcel, here's the fountain here. You have this ramp here is covered. That's this one here. 7.2 feet here above Cross Street. That would cover that ramp. This one is still open. You see that one is right over here. That's still open on the southern end of the southbound off ramp. And this is where it starts getting a little dramatic. So you're cutting across the ramps here. This is the southbound off ramp, which is right here. This is the northbound off ramp, which is right here. And you see the ramps have a vertical difference again. You've got one coming out of the ground, one going into the ground. So this is 11 feet over Cross Street. And then you see the separation here with the people on the platform, and now it's 18.7 feet above grade over here, right above the grass. That's roughly 3 people high. A little bit further north, those start to converge about the middle of right where there's overhead signs in here, so they get to be about the same elevation here. Similar height. 14.9 feet over Cross Street here, 14 feet over the grass area over here. Now, northbound off-ramp, the cover drops off. And we're still covering the southbound off-ramp here. That's 9.2 feet above the grass over here. And then the extreme end, again, we're almost back to grade back here at this end. Okay. That's really the only additional information we had to share, but I thought it was important to share that with you so that folks would understand the elevation differentials that we're talking about when we start talking about covering those ramp portals. It's up quite high. So now we'll get into the tabletop session. John's going to talk about the ground rules and how we're going to move forward from this, but we do have a lot of the information that you saw up here for the cross-section stuff that I showed you is actually down here on the tabletops, so we can work with that as we go forward. So John, you want to explain how we're going to do this?
I missed the meeting yesterday, so I'm getting stuck in with this.
Excuses.
I hope it's... So, I'm not going to try to read everything up there, you guys can see them. But basically what we want to do is we're going to do one parcel at a time. We're going to start with parcel 6, is that correct?
Sure.
Start with parcel 6. We're going to ask people to come up around the table, give us some of their thoughts, their ideas. We've heard a lot of them already, but we kind of wanted to make this a more hands-on. And we spent most of the last 2 meetings just talking to you and then just getting feedback at the very end. So, parcel uses, ideas on range of possible solutions, direction for the study team. On your agenda, if you notice, we have a series of like 3 or 4 or 5 questions that like we're kind of asking you. These are the type of information we're looking for on these. So as you're coming up with your ideas, we just try to use that as a little bit of focus. So, I'm not gonna read these all out. You have them. If you don't have one, there's a copy out there. But I think we're gonna put out the drawings, a couple of for each parcel, put them on the table. For those who want to come up and point things out, say things, write with a magic marker, great. If you don't want to do that, that's okay too. But we wanted this to be more interactive and hear more from you guys. Like I said, the last 2 meetings we've done a ton of information on you, so it's your turn to dump stuff onto us.